Hi, folks. My name is William Stickevers, and I have a question for you. Have you ever thought that gravity waves would be the underpinning mechanism behind astrology? Well, I'm here today to interview world-class astrologer Nadia Smirnova-Mierau. She's a New York-based experienced astrologer, writer, and speaker, a former nuclear physicist from the USSR. She's been studying and practicing astrology for over 30 years. Her passion lies in deep investigation and explanation of how astrology works from a physics perspective. Interesting. She has developed a revolutionary theoretical framework explaining the physics behind planetary influence of our daily life. And she is the author of Physics of Astrology ebook series, which you could find on Amazon.com. So I want to introduce you now to Nadia and welcome here. And I'm really excited about this interview and the topic and the material we're going to cover today.
Thank you, Bill. It's a wonderful introduction.
You're welcome. So I was, doing a little research on you, and I was really fascinated with your latest findings on some of the factors that are operational in physics today that really could be one of the underlying, if not the underlying mechanism behind how astrology really works. And I'd like to discuss that today, especially in regards to the word resonance. Resonance. I think that's the key word. Did I get it right?
Yes, that's the key word. It's one of my favorite keywords.
Yeah, so I was really just fascinated with the subtle but continuous resonant waves that are operating within the continuum in the space-time continuum that is prevalent all throughout the solar system, and how science has measured that, and how you've created the link between what science and physics has proved out and how it can relate to what we see symbolically in the chart, in an astrological natal chart, and how the planetary cycles work and have an impact on the world stage.
Thank you, Bill. That's exactly what I was trying to do, creating a link between what's known to science and astrology.
I was really fascinated with how you made that link, and how gravity waves was the essential energy wave, one of the primary energy waves that are continuously forming and informing our reality.
Gravity is another important keyword. Gravity is responsible for connection between us and celestial bodies. Gravity and resonance are the two important keywords that make up my framework. Some skeptics say that gravity is not really a good explanation for how astrology works, because the influence of the doctor is more powerful than the one of Jupiter, simply because doctor is so much closer. But that's only true from the perspective of a linear thinking. And that is true when you use Newtonian formula for gravity. These skeptics don't really take into consideration the big picture and an amazing phenomenon that is at play here, which is resonance.
That's great. So I think this is really exciting, and you're really pushing the frontier of astrology, the boundary of astrology. It's still astrology, but it's really going deeper and further and bringing it into a whole different place, and also really having us revision what our perception or about our roots about what we base astrology on. Where is this symbolic resonance coming from? What is the basis of this symbolic resonance of the moon in Aries in my chart, or Saturn transiting Saturn coming to my sun, or something, to that. Looking at that symbolic resonance that's very much connected with frequency and all these other subtle but continuous factors that are present in our current understanding of physics, and you making that connection, and then now putting together some type of structural framework and how pivotal events that will change the course of the narrative of your life as another layer on top of that. It sounds very fascinating. And I think everyone's just going to be really excited to see what you're going to present.
I'm excited to share my point of view on this because I see how it gets people thinking. Not only that, but understanding that there is a physics behind astrology, and astrology can be scientifically validated, helps quite a few closet astrologers proudly come out and say, I do astrology, and astrology is science.
Right, because I think one of the biggest issues with astrologers, what's almost embarrassing, is the fact that we don't really have a physical model to prove out how we are able to make these predictions and forecast and explain changes in people's moods and behavior on a relatively good, with a high level of consistency and accuracy. It's very embarrassing that in the 21st century, that really hasn't been addressed, or if it was certainly something astrologers by the mid-20th century moved away from, especially when astrology totally took on the psychological model of astrology and completely moved away from the physical aspect of astrology. So I think it was just really fascinating when I was reviewing material and looking at some of your lectures and the discussions we've had on how you talk about this type of frequency shifting resonance and how the moon plays a very key role, how gravity waves from Pluto all the way through from Mars get transmitted through the moon as an amplifier of resonance that changes the morphic field, our behavior, our brain waves, that in turn changes our neurotransmitters and shifts our behavior, our perception. So I found that really fascinating and really like a paradigm breakthrough for me, and I'm sure many others.
Thank you, Bill. Coming from you, it is very flattering because I know you as a deep thinker.
Well, thank you. But you've done great work, and I'm sure you'll be adding more information, changing it up a bit. You always seem to continually to improve, upgrade, deepen, and amplify what you did, especially since when I first met you in Atlanta, when you did your first presentation. And this seems to be like you're in a new level of physics where you've made tremendous strides astrologically, and then bringing closer, ever more so, the underlying, it's almost beyond physics, what you're talking about, in a sense where we have a fusion between the intangible and the tangible taking place here in your discussions.
I like what you said about tangible and intangible. I totally agree with you on that. It's also physical and non-physical, where physical phenomenon is crossing over to a non-physical phenomenon, or what was called a non-physical phenomenon by mainstream scientists. For some reason, some time ago, they decided that non-physical phenomenon is something that they don't want to study, and they only gonna focus on physical, which is something that they can touch and smell and measure with the devices. And nobody ever thought that there is a phenomenon like astrology, for example, or psychic phenomenon, that even though we don't have or didn't have the devices at the time to measure what's going on with that or to prove it scientifically, and that doesn't mean this is a non-physical phenomenon. Just because we don't know what it is, that doesn't mean it does not exist or doesn't have a validity. One can always assume that maybe in the future, when we get a little more sophisticated in our understanding of reality and consciousness, we might be able to grasp why things like that are happening. And we're not going to be called them non-physical anymore because there is a physics behind it. Just because we don't see something or we can't smell it doesn't mean it does not exist in a physical reality. Like, for example, electromagnetism or gravity. This is a physical phenomena, and it does exist in a physical reality, even though we don't see it and we can't touch it. Our brain and our entire body emits electromagnetic field around it. Our human electromagnetic fields interact with each other, and they interact with any other electromagnetic fields around them. And these electromagnetic fields are called auras. Our auras are super sensitive to any external electromagnetic influence. Just recently, we didn't have any gadgets to measure these auras, and the word aura was coming from a non-physical phenomena and was ridiculed by mainstream science. And guess what? These days there are cameras that can capture and photograph human auras, and aura is not a dirty word anymore. Just because mainstream scientists have never explored the physical connection between celestial bodies and us doesn't mean that physical connection does not exist. I believe that once mainstream scientists start taking astrology seriously, it will be very easy and no-brainer to see the connection between the moon and our behavior and our emotions, as well as between Venus and our beauty, Mars and our strengths, Pluto and our power and drive, and so forth.
Well, folks, you got it from Nadia. Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure speaking with you.